Have you had the experience where you're with a group of people and the subject of UFOs comes up and there'll be a few jokes tossed around and then one person will quietly insist that UFOs are no hoax and they've actually seen one? What are we to make of these stories? If there is such a thing as extraterrestrial intelligent life, why would they be coming around here in spaceships? People who once served as senior officers in the US and British military insist that there are such things. And the man who was Bill Clinton's chief of staff has said recently, it's time to open the books on the question of government investigations of UFOs. While others remain sceptical, Timothy Good has uncovered military and intelligence reports that he says prove that UFOs do indeed exist and have been concerning these organisations for quite some time. His book's called Need to Know, UFOs, the Military and Intelligence. Welcome, Timothy Good, to the Conversation Hour.
Good morning.
Before we get on to UFOs, I understand initially you were a very successful musician. Tell me about your music career.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Well, my father was a violinist and he taught me, and then eventually after school I went to the Royal Academy of Music on a scholarship, and then I began playing with major symphony orchestras such as the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. I toured America and Canada, and then I joined the London Symphony Orchestra, with whom I played for 14 years, and we toured Australia in 1966, as a matter of fact. And
you've also played on George Michael albums?
Yes, I did 20 years. I mean, I'm still playing occasional recording sessions and concerts and so forth, but I did 20 years basically doing what we call backing sessions for feature films, major feature films, for pop artists and television commercials, things like that.
Well, people who practice music at that level, it's an all-consuming passion. Tell me how it was that the issue of UFOs started to tug at you like that and draw you away from that.
As a matter of fact, it tugged at me as early as 1955. That's 51 years ago, when I read a book by Major Donald Kehoe describing sightings by airline pilots and military pilots, frequently corroborated by air traffic controllers on radar. So I got hooked, because as long as I can remember, I've been passionate about aviation and space travel.
I mean, when we think about the existence of extraterrestrial life, we think the universe is infinitely large. There's the almost a certainty that there's extraterrestrial life out there.
Right.
This knowledge was at the time when we first started to concentrate on UFOs. When you became interested, was the term UFO in currency?
It was more flying saucer for a long time, flying discs, flying saucers, and UFOs increasingly became used. It was an official Air Force, United States Air Force expression. They were first UFOBs, for unidentified flying objects, and then that contracted to UFOs.
To UFOs. Tell me about some of these sightings that were made by Kehoe that got you interested.
Right. If I can first preface the comment about unidentified flying objects. The most important point is that an unidentified flying object, a UFO, is just that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an extraterrestrial spacecraft. That's very important. And it's known that up to 90% of all UFO reports can be explained in conventional terms. That still leaves tens of thousands of reports, often by qualified witnesses such as military pilots and airline pilots. So that's what Major Kehoe was concentrating on in his works, and I was inspired by him.
And that's what you've concentrated on in your most recent book. All right, making that distinction then between UFOs and whether they're actually spacecraft piloted by extraterrestrial life. If they're not from extraterrestrials, who could be flying these things?
Well, I think in recent years it's quite possible that the Americans have developed very sophisticated, top-secret aircraft and spacecraft. I mean, often, like the Stealth Project, that starts 20 years before people even get to see a photograph of the thing. They're flying 15 years, 10 years, whatever before. And it's the same now. There are some very, very advanced spacecraft, I'm told, some of them using very unconventional forms of propulsion, which, if seen, would obviously give rise to an unidentified flying object report. But I do think some of them most definitely come from other civilizations, not necessarily all of them extraterrestrial. I think it's an outrageous theory. I'm not the first to propound the theory, but I am convinced that some activity comes right here on Earth from an advanced civilization which perhaps remains hidden to us and perhaps relating to our past. So I think this planet has been inhabited. there are bases, if you like, whatever.
Is that pure supposition, or is there evidence for that?
Well, some of the beings who are alleged to have established communication with us human beings say that we are a genetic byproduct by them of genetic engineering going way back to the period of Homo erectus. And at that time, they had actually established a colony on planet Earth, apparently. That's what's alleged. I certainly can't prove that. There's no documentation for that. But given that many of these beings are very, very similar to human beings, albeit maybe tens of thousands of years in advance of us, I think it's not such a ridiculous idea.
Where would they be? I mean, we'd surely see them.
Well, we have seen them. I was informed by one of my sources in Washington, D.C., that there are a number of bases around the planet. I was given some specific locations, some of them very non-specific.
Sorry, when you say sources in Washington, D.C., what do you mean? Do you mean military sources?
I mean military sources, yes. And I've learned that there are a number of areas around our planet, including some underground areas, where there are bases which have been there a very long time. And some of these bases, I am convinced, are linked with the so-called Bermuda Triangle, the northeast lakes area of North America, and places like the Bass Strait in Australia, where I start my book with official investigations into disappearing boats in 1920 and 1930 in the Bass Strait area, and on several occasions aircraft going to look for the boats have just gone missing themselves. And I'm convinced there's another case, famous one, Australian one, 1978, when a young pilot, Frederick Valentich, was flying from Melbourne to Tasmania, when he started reporting an unknown metallic flying craft hovering and harassing him in his Cessna aircraft. And this is all a matter of, this is not science fiction, this is all a matter of official record, because
yes,
the Australian governments, I've reproduced part of one in my new book.
And it was reported very widely at the time, the disappearance. The plane disappeared, it wasn't found, it was never been found in Bass Strait.
That's right.
And after reporting seeing this object. Nonetheless, a lot of the places you're talking about have got particularly treacherous oceans, and Bass Strait is one of those places. Isn't that the most likely explanation?
I'm sure of that, Richard. I'm absolutely sure of that. Again, the percentage might apply that maybe 90% of disappearing boats or whatever are due to just conventional accidents, of course.
Timothy, let's go back a bit to these the post-war period, which was when we started the word UFO came into common usage, as you say. The Roswell incident is the thing that's often brought up. What evidence do you have of the interest of the US military at that time, of that so-called incident?
Well, this is interesting because the US Army Air Forces at Roswell, at the time that something was discovered, a crashed vehicle or vehicles, 75 miles northwest of Roswell, and there was another site in New Mexico. So this was the first week of July of 1947. There was an announcement. I've spoken to the guy, the Air Force chap who was responsible for the press release. He was told by the station commander, "We have captured a flying disc." And this appeared in the newspaper headline the next day. It created pandemonium around the world, tremendous excitement. And they were inundated with calls, and the military was worried about people panicking. So the next day, statement went out that it was simply a crashed weather balloon. That's all. Now we have, and I've reproduced an affidavit in Need to Know, my new book, an affidavit from Brigadier General Dubose swearing that there was a cover-up, and the balloon story was a diversion to divert the attention, a containment strategy in military terms, to divert the attention of the press. But he said it was all fixed up. It was all hoaxed. There was a genuine spacecraft.
And what was found? What were the official descriptions of this craft?
Well, there are a number of people who've come forward. Some have said it was a disc-shaped craft.